Hello and welcome to the sixth part in a series of videos where I show how I've painted some Titans from Games Workshop's Adeptus Titanicus game in the colour scheme of Legio Mordaxis. In this part I tackle what is probably the most time consuming part of these miniatures and paint the armour trim. We've put our stripes on, so we're now in a position to apply our edge trims. Now, the edge trim takes a long time because there's lots and lots and it's covered in all the models. You've got some of it integral on things like the Warhounds, and there'll be bits and bobs on the Reavers as well. It's important when you pick the colour for your edge trim, make sure that you pick a colour that covers well. So Games Workshop's Retributor Armour is a good example. That's got quite a good coverage. As I said in one of my earlier videos, I'm a fan of scale 75 paints. So I am going for Negro Gold. Now this is a really nice gold that's got a hint of green in, so it's more of an antique gold. Got some on my palette here. Really, there isn't a lot of exciting things to say about painting the edge trim. You just need to make sure, because all metallics are sort of the same, in that you don't want to go over the same paint twice when it's wet, because otherwise you get ruckles and all sorts of problems. So just go round, take it steady. I would suggest you use a brush that's got a reasonable point, even though generally I try and avoid using good quality brushes when I'm painting metallic. I think because this is such a fine amount of detail, it's worth using a bit better brush. So basically you just need to go round, make sure you do underneath, you can go a bit heavier there, and so on. I won't finish this one because it's not the most exciting of things to watch. One thing to remember is that it's really important that you actually go down the inside of these trim lines. So you just need to go really careful and just paint almost an edge highlight. So it takes a little bit. You have to sort of be careful, be a bit stable, etc. Which is one of the reasons I've stopped talking. Once you've done that, you can actually move on to the washing. Now, I prepared one of these earlier. The wash that I'm using is Druchii Violet and Lahmian Medium. Now, this is just bog standard Lahmian Medium that I've put in a bigger dropper bottle. So, as with the contrast paints, just give it a bit of a shake. Two of them, and I tend to do a 50-50 mix of Lahmian and wash. That's actually blocked up typically. So just two. Now, brush wise, I'm a big fan of Citadel glaze brushes. They're basically like a small wash brush. So when you're washing, all you need to do is make sure that you drag the paint around. Try not to let it pool. And what we'll be doing is we'll be applying 2 coats of this. The first one, as with when we airbrushed the contrast on, the first one just lets it kind of settle on the surface and gives the next layer something to grip onto. You don't need a lot on your brush, just enough to kind of make sure that you're washing it. So that's the top of the trim done. And then you just run it on the inside and do the same. because we're not applying a massive quantity, generally the wash also stays where you put it. If you were applying a larger quantity, what you'll find is it will actually kind of do its own thing. There we go. Now, because we've only applied a thin layer, the coat on the top is pretty much dried. So, one of the things that you will want to do as well on the second coat, you'll see that there's odd bits that have just been slightly missed. So your second coat, you're aiming to cover them and put some along that panel line. Again, don't overload your brush, and try and drag it around where you want it to pool a little bit. So you want some natural shadows around rivets. You want them at the bottoms of and corners of panel lines and so on. Try not to get it too much onto the contrast, because what you'll find is it will actually change when it dries. It will dry quite matte, and it's okay for a little bit because it looks a little bit like dirt. However, if you have it splodged all over, what you will find is you get this weird purple tint on the black that looks a little bit unsightly. So there we go. Almost there. So that gives you a rough idea of what it will look like. It does look quite a bit different to the actual raw gold. So through the magic of video, that's now dry. What we now need to do is to take our Druchii Violet and just reinforce things like the rivets. We aren't actually going to do much in the way of highlighting on this, so it's important where we can actually add a little bit more depth and contrast, we do. If I was doing this on, say, an Imperial Knight, what I would probably do is I would apply more washes. I'd use some different coloured ones just to push that even darker, and I would then go in with my a couple of highlights. We don't want to do that because I think it really spoils the effect. So there we go. That's just pushed the rivets. What you also probably want to do, you can hopefully see there, what's happened is you've got a little bit of pooling, which is fine. So you just drag there and you push the shadows just to add a little bit of visual interest. When you are doing this, make sure that you start further away and pull into the corner. This paintbrushes work in an opposite direction to a pencil. A pencil, as you put it on, you get your greatest mark and then your least mark when you pull off. A paintbrush works in the opposite direction. You get your strongest mark where you pull the paintbrush off the surface. So I'm fairly happy with that. I think that's actually worked quite well. So that pretty much is done. Nice grungy. Like I say, I'm not looking for anything too clean. Now, even though I'm not going to do an edge highlight, one of the things that I do think is worth doing is going back in with the gold colour and just on the top of where the light will naturally catch, what you want to do is just do a very small edge highlight. Now this will probably barely show on this video, but if you just do that slightly, it's an real extreme highlight. What it does is it really helps to emphasise the fact it's gold. you also want just to touch each of the rivets. That in turn really helps to break up the wash that you've put over, because in some cases it's now quite dark. And this is as exciting as that, really. You now have got miles worth of trim to paint. So what I will do is I will go off and now spend a fair old chunk of time sorting that out. And probably one of the next, when I come back, we'll be getting to the point where the armour panels are almost, well, they will be done. It dawned on me as I was painting the trim that one thing that I've neglected to actually video was painting the chassis of the Titans. So that's all of the silver work, basically. It's actually really simple. So this edition is just going to explain exactly what I've done. So the first step is to tidy up any oversprays using Scale 75's black metal again. Namely, it's the ports on the Reaver. The Warhound, I didn't find I actually got much in the way of overspray, even on the toes. Once you've done that, what you want to do is you want to mix up 1 part Athonian Camoshade, 1 part Nuln oil, and 2 parts Larmian medium. So it basically makes a thin wash. Apply that wash using the wash brush all over your Titan. Make sure it doesn't pool anywhere. Make sure you don't go over any of the armour panels that you've sprayed with contrast. Once that's dried, go in with a second time, and this will really bring everything together. Again, let that dry. It's probably best to leave that a good couple of hours. And then what you want to do is to go in with a small dry brush, and you want to firstly go off with Scale 75's black metal again. Once you've done that, you just need to do Scale 75's heavy metal. This one you want to do fairly lightly. Work out, use a photo of one of your Titans where the actual armour panels sit. So you've got ones on the legs, for example, and on the front. Of particular note, you want to push the areas that have got lots of little intricate detail, like the toes on the Warhound. The Reaver is actually a lot more straightforward because there's not that much of it that is that prominent. One thing that I did do on the Reaver legs is I actually only washed inside the panel of these and dry brushed the rest up. That gives you a slight difference in look. A lot of this is going to be covered by armour panels anyway, so it's just to add a little bit of interest if somebody picks your model up and really has a good old ganders at it. That's all there is to painting the chassis, so I don't think I've missed a massive amount out by not recording me do it. But like I say, you do want to do this before you start painting the trim, because you don't want to be dry brushing on top of that trim. As you can see, the trim is very fiddly and it's really tempting to rush it. It is worth persevering though. The trim works as a frame to the flat armour panels and can really help make the miniature pop when it's down on the table. I would also like to apologise for the slightly out of focus camera for this video too. I'm still getting used to the video setup and I know I need to check on the focus a little bit more carefully from now on. In part 7, which is the last part in the series, I'll be showing off the completed Titans and go through how I painted some of the details and the weapons. I'd love to hear from you, so please leave comments or questions below and feel free to subscribe to my channel or follow me on Twitter or Instagram.